Hi guys, welcome to Total Technik. Today we're back working on the Audi Q7, and in this video we're going to be doing a full rear diff fluid change. Let's get it done. So first thing we need to think about is access. Obviously the rear diff here is located at the rear of the vehicle between your two wheels, got a drive shaft obviously on either side of this. Now when it comes to access, what we need to think about is how we're actually going to get under the car and work on this. So on the Audi Q7, obviously it's a kind of a mid-sized to large SUV, so the access isn't too bad. You can just about crawl under there. It is a little bit tight. Now one thing that you might have on your vehicle is the air suspension option. Now obviously if you do have that air suspension, hop in there, start the car up and lift that suspension up to its maximum height. Obviously that's going to give you an extra few inches to crawl around underneath the car here. And if you're not lucky enough to have the air suspension on your Audi Q7, then obviously the work is going to be a little bit cramped. You could look at jacking the car up or possibly putting it on axle stands, but the thing is with when it comes to working on things like diffs, as you'll see later in the process, these are reliant on gravity to be able to fill these successfully. So if you just jack up the rear of the car, obviously your car's no longer going to be level, and so that's not going to work. You need to lift the whole car up evenly. So it's not that easy to do. So if you can get underneath there, there might just be enough space. Luckily we've got the luxury of a ramp. We appreciate you won't have that. So it may be a little bit tight, but have a little look around. But worst case scenario, if you don't have the air suspension and it looks a little bit tight for you, you are going to have to put all four corners on axle stands. So if we look at the rear diff, we have a drain port which is just on the bottom right there, and we also have a fill port. You can see the fill port just up there. So the way that this works is essentially you use gravity, which is why your car must be perfectly level, to fill the difference between the two. So as you'll see later in the process, we need to drain it, and then what we'll do is we'll put this plug back in, and then we'll fill it with fluid until the fluid starts to drip out of this hole, and that's when it gets to the correct level. Once it starts to drip out of there, starts to overflow, then you put that back in, torque it back up to a spec, and that's essentially job done. It's a fairly simple process, but that's why it's really important that your car must be level, not jacked up, because we are relying on gravity. And it's also worth noting on the Q7 that this basic principle is identical also for the transfer case and the front diff. So we've got a bottom drain plug and a fill plug. So if we work our way down the car here, right here, towards the back of the gearbox, start of the prop shaft. This is the transfer case right here. Got a little bit of dirt in them. You can see we've got this is our fill port and this is our drain port. So again, you can use exactly the same process that you'll see in this video of using gravity is exactly the same for the transfer case. And also if we go further towards the front of the vehicle, we can show you, so yeah, just in there, obviously we've got our engine cover on at the moment, but you can see that's the drain plug there for the front diff, and just like the rear diff, you've also got a fill port as well. So again, that can be done. So you can do all three of those using this exact same principle. So what are we going to need for our rear diff change on our Q7? So the main thing we need is obviously going to be our oil. Now when you're choosing your oil, you need to make sure that it conforms to the GL5 specification, and your oil should be fully synthetic, and it's a gear oil, 75W90 GL5. And for quantity of oil, it normally takes about 1 litre, sometimes a little bit over. You might get to 1.2, 1.3. These are 946 millilitres, so obviously we do have 2 here. We might get away with only using the 1 if we get lucky, but we've got 2 just in case. So you need to make sure that you've definitely got up to about 1.2, maximum of 1.3 available for you for the job. And the other thing you might want to look at getting, depending on the condition of your old plugs, is you may want to look at possibly getting replacement plugs. The ones on this particular vehicle are quite rusty, so we have the replacements right here, just in case. And we'll put the part numbers and information for these all on screen for you. So if you need any of those, these are the correct ones for the diff on this Q7. So before we get on to the actual job of doing our oil drain and refill, It's best to do this job if the car's a little bit warm. So if you can, take the car for a quick 5 or 10 minute drive down the road. And what that will allow it to do, it will allow this your old fluid to warm up a little bit, and so when you do your drain, it will be thinner, and it will you'll likely get a much better drain. So a quick 5 to 10 minute drive around the block prior to doing this job is always useful. Now our plugs are a little bit scabby, so I'm just going to give them a bit of a clear out. The reason I do this is to make sure that when I put that bit in there, I've got rid of all the kind of the loose dirt and bits out of there. So when I put my bit in there, it will go in as deep as possible into the socket there. And so that's going to reduce the likelihood of it rounding out. If I leave all the dirt and stuff in there, I only put my bit in halfway, then obviously that could round out quite easily. If I give it a good clean out first and make sure that it gets right to the very, very end, then obviously the chances of it rounding out, it can still happen, but you've greatly reduced that likelihood. The other thing I'm going to do is just gently put my little hook tool around the edge here, because we've got a bit of a build-up of scum. Obviously not been done for a little while. I'm just trying to make these as easy as possible to get out. So all that kind of, we've got some kind of calcified stuff around it here. All that will stop that head turning. If I just get rid of 75% of that before I try turning it, then it will definitely help, and it certainly won't do any harm. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to put some penetration fluid on. We're using Plus Gas, but yeah, they do dozens of different brands. Liquid wrench, all that kind of thing. WD-40's also pretty decent at this. And obviously I'm not trying to get this through to the thread, but if I can just get it around the edge of the head, just there, it will just help a little bit when it comes to trying to crack this off. It'll only be a minor help, but anything that you can take that helps you when it comes to these things, it can only be a positive. So now it's time to have a look at removing the plugs. One very important thing to bear in mind is you might just think, okay, well, let's get it drained, undo this drain plug, let it all drain out. You should never touch this bottom plug until you've removed the top one. The reason being, if you go ahead and you just drop all the fluid out of it, and then you come up to this one and it rounds out, or you just can't get this thing out, then you are stuck. You won't be able to put the fluid back in, and your car will be stuck on your driveway. It's going to have to be towed to a garage or a dealer. You're going to have an absolute nightmare. So always better safe than sorry. Undo this plug first, because once that's undone, you can get that fluid back in. Once you're happy that that one's good, then you look at this one. Now the access on the Q7 is very limited here. It's difficult to get a bit in there and your wrench. So what you might have to do is get a bit in like this, and then get a long handled spanner or something like that, because the access is so tight. Or maybe you've got a little stubby bit or something you can put on the end of your wrench. Whatever you can do to get this removed. This is a size 8 hex on here. But like I said, access is pretty poor, so you might have to improvise a little bit. So because ours was so corroded, it's been really hard to get the bit in there. What we've had to do, because you can't hammer it from the outside, to kind of wedge it in using a pry bar, like so, just to get it into its maximum depth. It's been pretty tricky. So now I've got a long spanner here, so we're going to use that to try and slacken off the bit. Okay, so we have movement. Yes, we do. Okay, good. A little bit tricky. Wasn't too bad actually. They're not all that tight, so once you crack them off, they're okay. I can swap to my ratchet spanner now. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Okay, so we know that our fill port's good, so I'm just going to put that back in and just rescue my bit, and then the next stage is going to do the drain. Obviously before we undo this one, make sure that you've got a drain pan underneath it, because when you undo that, oil's going to come out, so make sure you've got your drain pan in place. It's always a good idea when you put the bit in, especially if they're a little bit rusty, give them a tap with a hammer. See how that managed to get that seated right to the end again, because if it's not all the way in, there's a chance that it could round out. So just a little tap, make sure it's fully seated before you undo it. So now you want to leave this until all of the fluids are drained out and you've just got a very, very slow drip. So we've got about as much as we're going to get out of there. So now I'm just going to give it a bit of a clean up before we refit the plug. So I'm going to be refitting the old plug. This one was okay. The one that was the fill plug I really didn't like the look of, so we'll be replacing that one with a brand new one. So now we need to torque this up to the proper spec. So for the Audi Q7, you want to grab your torque wrench and we need to torque this up to 35 Newton meters. So next we've got to look at the easiest way of getting our fluid into our fill port. Now if you take your car into Audi, and this is done in an Audi workshop, they actually use a fluid pump, so they can actually pump it uphill and that will go straight into that hole nice and easy. If you don't have that luxury, then of course we need to find a different way of doing that. Now when we do this, thankfully we can just use the power of gravity to get this down. So as long as the point at which we fill this is higher than this, then gravity will bring it down. So what we're going to do is we're going to run a tube from here up to somewhere kind of in the wheel arch area where you'll be able to put the oil down, and the oil will flow down through that into this hole. So first thing to do is find a piece of suitable tubing, and when you put this in, what you want to try and do is make sure, you see this is because it's been rolled, it's got a kind of a natural curve in this direction. So when I put this in, I want that to be facing downward, so that it's actually putting the fluid down into the diff. Obviously if I put that upwards into that hole like so, then it's going to come out of the end and it's going to be dripping back down the pipe, and it's going to might give us a false reading as it starts to flow out of the hole. If I turn that over and the hole's here, obviously it's lower than the hole, and so it would have to fill just slightly above the pipe to then start coming out. So if you've got a natural bend in the pipe, or you can obviously make one, you want it to be going slightly downward when you put it into the hole. So you've just got to find the best way to route it through. That will do us. And put it a good couple of inches into the hole, and that'll take us to this stage here. And then we need to find a point at which we can kind of get this up kind of into the wheel arch or away from the side of the car where you can actually start putting the oil in. So I've just brought my plastic tubing here up into the wheel arch area. That's going to give me enough space here just to start putting my oil in. You can also use a slightly longer piece of pipe and obviously extend it out past the wheel arch, and do it in front of the wheel arch as well if you want or need to. So it just so happens that the particular oil we're using has this kind of a nozzle on it, which would be perfect for inserting into our plastic piping. Now you may not have that, you might just have a traditional screw-on, screw-off cap, and so what you might have to do in place of this is you might have to attach a funnel to the end of your plastic tubing, and then obviously pour that slowly into the funnel and let that drain down. When you're squeezing the bottle here, you'll probably find you have to stop every now and again, just let a little bit of air in and then carry on. Just makes squeezing the bottle a little bit easier, allows the bottle to expand each time. As we can see here, we're just starting to get our first few drips from our overflow of the level. Now it's a good idea to gently rotate the wheels a few times in both directions. This will just help ensure that everything's moving around and getting as much out as possible. So next, it's always a good idea to leave this until it goes to a virtual stop on the drips here, and then wait about 5 to 10 minutes just to make sure that there's no kind of air pockets in there, and you've rotated the wheels and you've made sure that everything is as it should be in there, you're circulating it. And then once you've done all that and you've waited 5 to 10 minutes, then what you can do is you can squirt just a little bit more in, and you should see that will start coming out immediately. All you need is one little quick squirt, and you should see that it shouldn't really take much more fluid. It should come out straight away. If it does take a little bit more fluid to get it to drain, then that means that there was a kind of an air lock somewhere in there and you have got rid of it, so that's a good thing. So because I've still got some fluid in my tube, I'm just going to pull this out and cap it off as best as I can. There you go, and with the pipe removed, we can see we were a little bit over the level. Now I've already waited close to 10 minutes now. I've rotated the wheels several times. So I'm happy now that when that level slows to a drip, that there's definitely no air in the system and it's circulated correctly. And so I'm happy now to close that off. So I've finished with this pipe now. So now I've got a slow drip. I'm ready to refit the plug. We're fitting a brand new one here because the one we had previously wasn't in very good condition. So we've now got to torque that up to 35 Newton meters, the same as the drain plug. Now I've got very limited access here on the Q7 to because of this beam just up in here. So what you can do with your torque wrench, if you've got a crow's foot bit, this is a size 10, I've got my little bit just up in there, and that's also size 10. So what you can do is you can fit your crow's foot on there. Now the problem of doing this is it actually changes the centre of reading from where the torque is measured, which is normally between the centre point here and the handle. It changes it from there to there, if that makes any sense. So that would make it a couple of centimetres longer. However, if you do it directly sideways, so it's perfectly at 90 degrees in this manner right here, then the torque will still be the same. So it has to be there. You can't start doing it at these kind of angles because that will change the torque. If you keep it at 90 degrees in relation to the head, then that's absolutely fine. And the theory is it doesn't matter how far out that extends, the torque reading will always be the same. So now we want to give it a good clean up. I've got a degreaser right here, so I'm going to give it a quick clean. Especially, you can see just under there, got a little bit of the old oil. Well, it's actually a new oil technically, just there. So you want to make sure that you clean this up properly, because what you want to do later in the process, in a day or two, you want to stick your head back under the car and make sure that you don't have any leaks from either of these plugs. So if I left that like that, I might think that that's a leak. So you want to get rid of any traces of the old fluid with a good cleaner. So when you look under here again, you'll be able to see a new leak immediately. So now you're ready to take your car for a test drive and make sure that everything feels as it should. When you get back from your test drive, you should shove your head back under the car, shine a torch up on here and see that these are still sealed properly and that you've got no signs of any visible leaks. And likewise, you want to do the same thing the following day, the next morning, once the car's cooled down again, before you take it on a big run. Just shine your torch on it quickly, make sure that the seals on these are looking good. So that's now job done. That is how we do a rear diff oil change on the Audi Q7. If this video has been helpful for you, can we ask you to take 1 second out of your busy day and just hit that like button for us. Also, if you could consider subscribing, we've got hundreds more great Audi videos on our channel waiting for you to check out. We appreciate it, guys, and we'll see you again.